welcome everyone formally to our webinar, which is 7 ways to improve quality in the contact center. So we've got a very packed agenda that we're going to be going through today, and delighted to welcome back to you Justin Robbins. Justin joining us for our first for his first webinar of the year. So Justin, welcome back.
Good to be here. Thank you, Johnny.
And you're going to be sharing some of the thoughts about using quality in perhaps a different way from some of the traditional uses.
I am. I'm going to look at really just 4 different things on how we can move quality from kind of a tick box mentality to what we were hearing in some of the chat room comments beforehand of how do we change behavior? How do we get agents to engage? What do we need to do to make quality something that people want to be a part of, not that they feel they're forced into?
Excellent. And welcome to Derek Corkin from School Buddy for his first webinar with us. Welcome, Derek.
Thanks, Jonty. Great to be here.
And you're going to be talking through about, sort of putting quality into a framework and establishing things like calibration, but also looking at the way that technology can improve quality, because that's one of the things I see a lot is that there isn't a great deal of technology behind most quality programs.
Yeah, we're going to touch off that. I suppose we're looking at technology as an enabler. So the processes and workflows that, operationally contact center managers are used to, they don't fundamentally change, but there's a lot you can do if you can consolidate that information and make it available. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, if you're not already logged into our chat room, here's the address here, callcenterhelper.com/chat. We've got about 35 people logged in already, which is only about a third of the audience. So here's the address, callcenterhelper.com/chat. It is in a different window, so you need to enter that into a different window. What a lot of people do is, just like here, is they put the chat window on one side of the screen, they put the slides, the webinar window on the other side, and you can see both pieces that are going on. You can use that to share information, to share tips, to network with other members of the audience. And there's an added advantage being in there that you can download webinar slides. So you click on the slides. We've got quite a lot of detail in those slides. You can do that here. Also, you can ask questions, or you can give tips. And we do have a bottle of champagne. It's in this rather nice presentation case here. So it is hashtag tip for the best tip, or hashtag question for the best question. If you want a copy of to watch the replay of this, I know a lot of you do like to share the webinars with your management team. You can do that, callcenterhelper.com/recorded webinars. And we have been asking the question in the chat room, what is the main focus of your quality program? So if you'd just like to add that into the chat room, then we can do that. And just like to look at what system you are currently using for quality scoring. So just going to put up a poll. This is in the webinar side of the screen. So are you using spreadsheets? Are you using an in-house developed solution for quality scoring? Are you using commercial scorecard software, or using something like speech analytics? So you can vote on all of those that you've got in use there. Derek, I'm expecting probably spreadsheets would come up quite high in the voting.
Yeah, honestly, we do see a lot of companies moving away from spreadsheets into a dedicated solution, but there's a lot of people using in-house and proprietary as well. Yeah. Okay,
well, let's have a look at what people are doing. And indeed, spreadsheets. 57% of the audience are using spreadsheets. Interesting, 37% of people are using in-house design solutions. So I certainly think that's quite interesting. 25% are using commercial scorecard software, and only 5% are using speech analytics. Justin, I see probably about 20% of contact centers now have speech analytics. So it looks like people may not be using this for quality purposes.
Yeah, that definitely aligns with what I've seen when I've researched, is that even to your point, Johnny, they may have it, but they're not utilizing it to its fullest capability.
Indeed. So that's some quite fascinating pieces there. Let's have a look at how people are using the main focus of their quality program. Elka says the main focus is to improve customer experience, but my personal focus is to specify coaching areas. We've had Charlie who says the main focus is simply customer experience. And Dion has also said the main focus is customer experience as well. So it's quite interesting. Jamie made a comment on the technology solution, says we have a technology solution that doesn't work and my team codes its own solution. So it certainly sounds like, Jamie, you might need to have a chat with Derek after the webinar. Okay, well, now's a good time to jump across to Justin. And Justin, if you'd like to share with us your thoughts on how to improve quality in the contact center.
Absolutely, it would be my pleasure, and I'm gonna get us up and going there. Great. So Johnny, Derek, and everyone with us, just a real quick background on me. I actually got started in contact centers as a teenager. My very first job was at 13, working outbound sales, and I've really spent, the better part of the past 2 decades in and around contact centers and customer service teams. Quality is near and dear to me, if I'm being honest. One of the biggest portions of my career was spent at Hershey. If you're familiar with the chocolate company, or if you've been in Pennsylvania, Hershey, Pennsylvania is the sweetest place on earth. And during my time there, what I got to work on were our quality, our training, and our customer experience programs. So I'm going to share a bit of what I learned during my time, not only in the quality leadership role, but also in my time doing research, consulting, and even today, some of the work that I do with organizations on how do you improve the state of quality, but more importantly, the adoption and the results that you get from it. So would love to stay in touch with people that are with us today. So I want to start with my favorite quote from a dead white guy, and that would be, quality is not a habit or an act, it is a habit. Quality is not an act, it is a habit. And the reason I wanted to share this quote at kind of the beginning of today's webinars is I believe that for many of us, our quality forms have become about just doing something. I want to make sure I hit all of the tick boxes on the form. I want to make sure I do these things, and it becomes about an act, a facade of delivering great service, but it's not actually habit building. And great quality programs are about creating long-term sustainable changes and improvement. And that's what I want to talk through today. When I talk about quality, it's not about just having your employees put on an act, but how do you build habits that are going to become second nature to them, that are going to enable them to deliver the best possible customer experience that also meets all of your needs as an organization? Because I believe fundamentally quality, Johnny, you asked the question about 1 or 2 words. What would you say is the purpose of quality? And if I were to say 2 words, one would be foundation and the second would be finesse. Quality is one part foundation, whether or not we're doing something, and then finesse, how well we do it. And so I want to talk through just a few tips on what I think we could do to make that happen in our organization. I'm going to give the first 4 today, and then Derek is going to talk us through the other 3. But the first thing I want to talk about is I want to talk about why we need to focus on outcomes and behaviors, not necessarily just doing the thing. It's not just about doing the thing, but what's the result we want to drive. I want to talk about how we measure and what's truly important from our forms. I'm going to talk a little bit about calibration and why that's really cornerstone to somebody talked about agent engagement and using quality as a tool there. We talked about that consistency. So I'm going to talk about why and how we use with calibration as that tool. And then lastly, I want to talk about making the jump between doing the act of quality, measuring it, however we're engaging with it, and then moving that forward to coaching, moving that forward to the building of habits, moving that forward to the long-term sustainable changes in behavior. So first thing I want to really talk about here is this idea of a framework that sets the stage for our quality programs. And the reason that I think this is important, because many of us, if I were to ask you the question of why is your contact center quality what it is? Why do you ask the questions that you have? Why do you go about the approach that you have? Many of you weren't the ones who created the program, and so many of you are doing what was done before you without really knowing the reason why. And so there are three things that I think are really important for us, and when I'm working with organizations or when I was even leading a quality program, three things that I think are really important for us to set that solid framework, to set that great beginning for our quality program. Number one is to really look at the purpose. So when I talk about the purpose of your contact center's quality program, there's three things that we need to fundamentally be able to answer. Number one is, why are we doing this? Some of you, maybe the first time you ever answered that question was when Johnny asked it here at the beginning of the webinar. Maybe some of you have yet to do that, or maybe some of you ask that question every single month or a few times a year, or at least annually. But why are we doing this? Why do we have a contact center quality program? When I look across different organizations that I work with, you see a number of different things. One might say that the purpose of their contact center's quality program is to ensure that they comply with all legal and regulatory standards. That's absolutely fine. One of the things that we hear is that the purpose of their contact center is to make sure whether or not new behaviors and new initiatives have been adopted. And so they just do it for a season. If they're going through a sales campaign, their quality program at that time is to make sure that the new campaign is going well and people are doing everything that they can do. But you need to ask the why. Why are you doing it in the first place? Second thing that we need to really ask in that the definition of the program is, what do you plan to achieve? Now, here's the challenge with that, and I'm going to dive into it a little bit later, but some of you have said really great things, like you want to achieve agent engagement, you want to achieve customer satisfaction, you want to achieve compliance and behavior. But what often happens is what we want to achieve is maybe not in alignment with the way that we've set up our quality program. And so maybe you want to achieve employee engagement through your quality program, but you haven't set your quality program up to do that. And so in order to understand whether or not you're being effective, not only at your why, but also at your what is, you have to be able to measure it. And when we set goals and when we set standards on how we're going to measure something, there's a number of things that we have to be thinking through. We have to think about how easy is it going to be to access the data? How timely is that information going to be? How predictable will that be of success? And so we're going to talk through some of those things a little bit more, but this is why when I think fundamentally what's important to a quality program, this is one of the reasons why I think having the right tool is really important. This is one of the reasons why I think root cause analysis, for example, is fundamental to a tool that helps us with a great quality program, because it enables us to dig into why we're doing this, what we plan to achieve, and then also understand how we can measure what matters most. So that's number one, is understand the purpose. When we think about the how will we measure it, though, I want to talk about meaningful performance standards. And to me, meaningful performance standards need two things in order to happen. Number one is we need to have good customer expectation data. What good expectation data is not your assumption, your belief on what you think customers want. Customer expectation data has to be built off of actual respondents from customers. And so maybe this is a great way to start with your customer satisfaction surveys to hear where customers are satisfied or dissatisfied. Maybe you partner with your marketing team to do focus groups or studies on customers to really understand what do they want when they interact with your organization. And you can look at research by a number of organizations, from Forrester to Gartner and so many more. And we hear a lot of things on expectations. One of the things that we know is they expect timely service. One of the things we also know is they expect for their emotions to be acknowledged, and that agents have emotional intelligence to adapt to that. But for us as an organization, we have to be able to tie those things, such as customer satisfaction, such as sentiment, back to QA. And so part one is there. But the other part then is organizational data of what matters to us as a company. And And I'll give one example in a short while of a company who what mattered to them and what mattered to their customers were in disalignment. And that was absolutely okay. But we'll talk about why we want to try to get customer expectations and organizational data and expectations to align as closely as possible. And the last thing, when we think about a framework, is we want to be able to focus on results, not activity. And I'm going to show you an example of what that might look like, and would happy to share even more examples of different types of quality frameworks on setting this forward. But here's an example of what I mean when I say that a framework focuses on results, not activity. So what I've done is I've put two different columns here together. On the left-hand side, we can see some of the typical activities that I see in quality frameworks or in quality forms. So that first one, for example, is they're looking at agents achieving a specific talk time range or a handle time range or after call work. And the driver of why we as organizations might want to measure that are a few things. One, of course, we're thinking we want to be sensitive to cost. And so we know that if we are very intentional about the amount of time we can try to control cost, or we know that if we focus on a short amount of a talk time or handle time, that hopefully that means the agents are being as efficient as possible. All of those things, though, are because we actually want the result of customer satisfaction. Here's the challenge with that, and here's a mistake that I see many quality programs make, is they put, was the customer satisfied, on their quality form. But unless your agents are mind readers, or unless the customer explicitly says to you, I am extremely satisfied, it's very difficult for us as quality analysts or as quality managers to make the decision on whether or not the customer was satisfied. And so one of the things that I recommend is, if we really want to understand customer satisfaction, well, we don't measure customer satisfaction with our quality program, but we use customer satisfaction as a tool to tie back to quality, to inform the way that we shape our quality program, that the two should work together, but they're not necessarily one in the same. Some other examples here. One large hotel chain that I worked with had this standard in their quality form, is that they wanted the agents to use the customer's name 3 times during the interaction. And when I asked them at the root of it, what do you really want the agents to do? They said, well, we want them to build a relationship. We want them to build rapport with the customer. And I said, well, what if you give the freedom to the agents of saying, what I want you to do is build a rapport, and we will judge through the quality process how well you do that, rather than saying this activity of using 3 names, which may or may not do anything to build rapport. Rather than using an activity like that. Just a couple other examples here. Maybe you're saying, we want you to offer the special of the week, but the result you really want is making the sale. And so how can we change our mindset to focus on that? Or one of the things that, if I'm being honest, a common pet peeve is, it's about number of interactions. We just want you to handle as many as possible. It's about this quantity rather than the actual quality of the interaction. And it seems counterintuitive that our quality programs would be helping our agents to focus on quantity rather than quality, but some of us accidentally do that. So just some examples of ways we might want to think differently. And so maybe you want to walk away from today and look through your quality framework, or look through your standards and say, are we focused on activity or results? And what would it look like if we gave our agents the freedom to focus on the results and allow them to create the activities that got them to that place? Second thing I want to talk through, as far as a really important tip here, and it goes into more of the why are we doing quality, but you have to have a solid definition to your strategy. In other words, what I want you to do is go back, and this is one of those places where it can be really great to begin agent engagement conversations, is go back and get your quality analysts, get your supervisors, and maybe get some agents in a room and talk about, what is the purpose of our quality program? What is it today? Or maybe more importantly, what should it be as we move forward? And so what are some of the questions, if I was back running a quality team, what were some of the questions that I would be asking? And what are some of the questions that I think you should be asking? And I want you to ask, well, number one, who who should do it. And maybe for some organizations, I worked with one organization, they changed their quality program, and for a period of time, they enabled their agents to score themselves. And not only that, but they enabled agents to score supervisors taking the call, because what they wanted to do is create the mindset that we're all in this together, and we all know we're going to have to learn. We all know we're going to have to change. And there's opportunity for all of us to come together and to do it well. And so maybe for a season, it's revisiting who should do it. Another thing you need to be thinking about is how often. Not only how often do you monitor interactions, but more importantly, how often can you deliver coaching based off of those interactions? I see contact centers set a goal for maybe 5, 7, 10 interactions monitored per agent per month, and they're never able to get to that amount of coaching. And so maybe what you want to look at is we want to make sure that we're able to monitor X number, because we know that we can deliver X amount of coaching sessions. Or maybe you're saying, I want to pull in a sophisticated analytics tool that can do trending analysis on keywords or on certain patterns or behaviors. And we're going to do that to develop larger coaching. And then we're going to provide really focused, actionable one-to-one meetings with our agents. Going then to what those meetings look like, you have to answer how you should do that. I'm going to give you some examples on what those coaching sessions look like, but really you have an opportunity to blend both formal and informal coaching, and that can happen across a number of environments. It's important that you define what that looks like, though. Also, you need to define what you should monitor. Maybe you don't want to monitor everything. The purpose of your quality program, the strategy of your quality program will and absolutely should be different from the next organization, because your businesses are not identical. Your customers are not the same. And so it's important that you create a bespoke approach to your strategy for quality. But one of the things you do need to decide is, what should you monitor? Do you handle interaction across multiple channels? And if so, are you monitoring what happens on SMS or on Facebook chat or on your video contacts that might happen? And then really the linchpin to this, as I said earlier, is the tool that we use. I already alluded to some of the things that I think are important, but having a tool that enables you to do root cause analysis, I think, is incredibly important. Having a tool that enables you to collaborate with the business, such as marketing or product development, to enable and inform what you're doing as a business moving forward, I think is absolutely important. And some of the things that I talked about that are very complementary to quality, such as customer satisfaction or being able to analyze customer sentiment or behavior patterns. It's really important to be able to tie and connect those to what's happening in your quality program. And so I just shared even these first two tips. I know I've talked through a bunch of things that we need to consider. And so right now, maybe you start to think, what are some of the changes that we need to make to the program? And so I would say take just 10, 15 seconds right now. And the first word that comes to mind is, what's one of the changes that you need to make? And maybe it's just we have to better define our strategy, or we really need to think about our framework. But if I were to say one action item for you walking away from today's webinar, is being able to answer that question is, what's the one thing that if you changed in your current quality program, it would be a game changer. It would enable you to achieve things like you've never achieved before, to get results like you've never seen before. And so that's my action step to you, is what changes do you need to make?
And it would work very well if anyone, when they've come up with that one change, that one thing, if they perhaps like to put that into the chat room, maybe with the hashtag one thing. So, I love it. So if there's one change you want to make your quality program, put that into the chat room with the hashtag one thing.
Love that. Thank you, Johnny. So I alluded to this earlier, the importance about calibration. And what I'm going to say about calibration is there's actually 4 levels of calibration. Some of you may be achieving level 1 today, and that may be where you've been for a number of years. Some of you may be achieving all 4 of these, or a combination. And I want to share each of them and a little bit about why they're important. At the basic level, if you're just walking into quality today, it's your first day or your first week on the job, and you've never held a calibration session before, here's the goal that I want you to set for maybe the next 2 to 3 months of your meetings is is I want you to work with your team on what's the overall impression of the contact. So at a very kind of fundamental level, would you say that overall it meets or doesn't meet our expectations of what the customer experience should look like? And I realize maybe some of you we're in quality. We want to get into the details. We want to get into the weeds and the minutia. But what I would say to just start, just an overall gut check among everyone in the room for your calibration session is, what's the overall impression of the contact? And who are some of the people that should be in the room for calibration? Well, definitely it's your people who are monitoring and scoring interactions. Definitely your coaches in the room, but maybe even some supervisors if they're not part of the quality progress process, but they're involved in conversations and coaching with the agents. But now, level one is that overall impression meets or does not meet expectations. When I would do these in my contact center, we would have two little wooden paddles. One would have a smiley face and one would have a green Mr. Yuck face. And what we would do at the end of the interaction is I would just have everybody hold up one of the panels. Was it the smiley face? It was the green yuck face. And that was our litmus test for, we think overall it meets or it does not meet expectations. Also makes for a little bit of fun and really great conversation on what your overall impression is. Once you get past level one and you're all agreeing on the overall impression, the next step is to be calibrated on what to coach. Here's my warning sign. Here's the place where I'm going to encourage all of you to stop and do a check with your quality program. If you're recording an entire interaction and you go into the coaching session and you play the entire interaction for the agent and you say, look at all of the things you did right or you did wrong, you're ineffectively coaching in those interactions. What we should be doing off of any quality interaction when we go to coach is coach no more than one, maybe two behaviors. Maybe it was about the opening of the call. Maybe it was about the language that they used to convert that person to a customer to get the sale, or maybe it's the way that they spoke about a special product or offering that they were trying to customize. We calibrate to coach 1 to 2 things, no more than that in a given session. So maybe then you take 2 to 3 months to get consistent there. Maybe for some of you it'll happen faster. Maybe some of you it'll take longer, but at least 2 to 3 months of, are we consistent on what we would coach in the interaction? Level 3 then, if you use ratings or scores or whatever your scales are, level 3 calibration is to go standard by standard and say, how did you rate that? If you use a Likert scale of 1 to 5, how did you rate that specific behavior? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If it was a yes or no, why did you rate yes or no? So standard by standard. And now your quality program shouldn't be 3 pages of standards. It should really be no more than 1 page, front side, not back, 1 page. And so this shouldn't take a lot of time, but it is important then to be able to calibrate it by performance standards. So that's level 3. So again, 2 to 3 months, maybe more, to be calibrated by standard. And the last level of calibration is being able to calibrate your quality scores to customer satisfaction. Here's a warning. A few months ago, I got a call from a very good friend of mine, and he said, Justin, I'm worried that I'm going to lose my job. He said, we recently put in 2 programs. We just put in a new customer satisfaction program and we put in a new quality program. And I think both are great. But here's the challenge, he said to me. He said, on my quality scores, customers are rating us very, very poorly, but quality couldn't be better. He said, and my boss said I'm doing something wrong, and if I don't figure it out, I'm going to lose my job. I need your help. And so I said, well, let's take a look. Maybe it's a bad survey. I looked at the survey. It is one of the best surveys I've ever seen. I said, maybe it's your quality form. I looked at the quality form. I said, this is one of the best quality forms I've ever seen. I said, wait a minute. You handle a bunch of different types of interactions with your organization. Are you using this for all of them? He said, I am. And I said, is there a specific group where it's really noticeable that there's a disconnect? And he said, there is. And I said, what group is that? And it was his group of agents who were responsible for calling people and telling them that they were denied for mortgages, that they couldn't get the money to buy the house of their dreams. And I said to him, I said, no wonder customer satisfaction is low. They aren't happy because they're not getting what they wanted. But you're doing everything right on your end, and your agents are doing all that they could from a quality standpoint. And so I said to him, you are never going to be able to correlate customer satisfaction with quality on that center, and that's absolutely okay. And so that's why I said for some of you, maybe you're able to achieve all 4 of these, but for some of you, it's just not going to be possible. And you have to ask the hard question. Sometimes just the answer is right in front of you. Is this the right thing for us? So down and dirty, I want to quick give you some tips on the calibration process, and I'm happy to talk more about this after the webinar, but I'd say there's 5 steps to the calibration process. Number 1 is set a facilitator. Have somebody who's going to help steer the conversation and decide who's going to be in the room participating. Second, for your process is you have to decide how often you're going to do it. I love when calibration happens at least once a week, but I understand maybe for you it's every other week, or maybe you start with once a month. I would really encourage you to try to get to the every other week, at least as a starting point. How many contacts do you calibrate in a session? Again, I recommend maybe 1 to 2 at most. Depending on where you're at in the maturity curve of calibration, maybe you're just calibrating on overall feeling, you're calibrating on scores, or maybe you're calibrating on coaching. But it's also important that that process, that environment is safe where everyone can honestly share their opinions. And that facilitator, it's their job to make sure that everybody does share their opinion. So then you select the interactions, you conduct the calibration, and you have the conversation to reach consensus. I know that's a quick and dirty approach, and would love to share more, but I think it's important that we at least have a process. Yep. I'm sorry?
No, sir, carry on. We're running a little short on time. But.
Oh, no worries. So one last thing on connecting quality to coaching then is that your coaching process should do just a few things. Number 1 is making sure that you have a roadmap, understanding where are people today and where do you want to get them going. Number 2, as we talked about, is know what those desired behaviors are. What's the why and the what that you want to achieve in their quality program? We talked a bit about coaching, and my note is there are a lot of coaching models that are out there. I'm not going to say you need to use a specific one, but you need to have a approach, a framework to how you're going to coach and score quality. It's important then that we're documenting all of our feedback, having the paper trail of what we've been working on with agents as they move through our organization. And then lastly, also just a framework for measuring whether or not our coaches are effective. We spend so much time measuring how well our agents do our job. It's important to make sure that we measure the effectiveness of our coaches as well. And so my last piece before I send it back over to you guys is just a few decision points that I would say as we move forward to coaching. Be thinking about those 1 to 2 behaviors that I mentioned in the coaching process. Be thinking about, is this a new behavior? Is it something that this agent has been doing for some time? Based off of whether it's been ongoing or recent, you might want to just do it on the fly. Stop by their desk and say, great job, way to go. So pleased with how you handled that. Or maybe you schedule some formal one-to-one time. And then lastly, on the documentation process is, have you observed improvement? Is this about creating habits, or are people just doing the thing? Because what coaching, what quality should be about long-term is observable improvement, seeing that sustainable success in the contact center. Johnny, Derek, thank you guys.
Thank you very much indeed there. Some wonderful words of advice. I've got a few takeaways from that. Quality is not an act, it's a habit. So I think any lesson we can derive from about 350 BC has probably proven itself by now. We also have focus on results, not on activity. I think there's a danger in the quality program. We often do focus on the activity, not the results. And I think your example of, rather than using the customer name 3 times, the real thing is driving behavior. Did you improve rapport? And I think the last one that I've taken away there is, one quality form does not fit all. I think there's a big danger, particularly when we go into percentage scoring, that something may not apply. So someone who perhaps doesn't have that in the conversation gets higher score than someone who does. So I think one form doesn't always fit all. So some great things. We've had absolutely loads and loads of tips and questions. Justin, your one thing, we've got, I'll just go through a few of those. The one thing Jamie says is to change the interaction between the recipients of the coaching content and the QA. Charlie says we're looking to change the quantity of coaching. We just need to do more QA. Guy has said we need to calibrate the definition, work instructions, and review across all locations we serve, but have got a different legacy. So that sounds like perhaps one size doesn't fit all there. Ivana said we need to create a culture where advisors are allowed to be natural when communicating in chats, calls, and emails, and avoiding the scripts and templates. Hoorah, I say, for that. Eugene set a strategy to contribute to the organization. Audrey said get line manager buy-in to support the quality element and not disregard it for quality when it suits. So Justin, quite a range there so far.
It's great.
And we've also got a few more. Claire says, I want to define a way to measure simple and straightforward customer journey. Ben has said, I want to look at customer Kaizen. I'm not familiar with that. Breaking down the whole process and then looking at why we do each individual action and what value it does offer us. Ben, if you've got any more information on Kaizen, I'd love to see that.
That's Six Sigma.
Oh, Six Sigma, okay. And Jason says, create a better relationship between QA and the rest of the business. So QA is seen as a control which supports business improvement. Derek, there's also a number there that seem to point to a sort of
resonate, yeah.
You know, resonate with some of your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, again, the one size fits all issue, and also you can have problems with other parts of the business imposing sort of elements within the quality process which may not be relevant to the customer outcome, right? So some of it is infrastructural type stuff or process driven, which can make the scoring and the collection of the data painful. So you really need to balance the need for data and the focus for collecting that data. And you know, I'd echo a lot of what Justin was saying there. The other aspect is quality. If it's treated operationally, it tends to stay within the contact center. If you want to collaborate, if you want to share the outcomes and the insights, you need to involve other parts of the business. And then, you know, the question is, how do you do that? How often do you do that? Is it real time? Is it once a month, once a quarter, whatever? So yeah, some interesting comments there.
We've had a couple of questions about external information. Elsie says, do you have any information on using employee satisfaction survey results as a possible leading indicator for the state of client satisfaction? And Guy has said, does anyone combine external input, for instance, part of a net promoter score questionnaire, with an independent quality review team? I think, Justin, you were talking about combining different data sets.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love the word independent quality review team, as where sometimes it really is good to have that just kind of third party set of eyes, be able to step back and say, hey, here's what we're seeing everything externally. So for example, they gave in the question of net promoter. Here's the things that you're measuring quality. Here's where maybe a gap analysis would be. And here's how you can use those things and create a great tool that combines them to move forward.
And we've had a comment back from Jason, where he says that QA can also be used to ensure good customer outcomes, but can also challenge the business of the processes too. Too much time is often focused on confirming how the process has been followed, rather than is the process right to ensure customer outcomes. I guess that ties in, Justin, with your comment on results versus activity. And in a similar, slightly different gauge, Mark has given a tip: focus on behaviors. Passionate, friendly, professional, interested, helpful, engaged. Whatever the behaviors are important to your business, encourage your agents to define the meanings of each behavior and perhaps score them on a scale of 1 to 5. You know, perhaps where 1 is unacceptable, 2 is support needed, 3 is delivering standards, 4 is exceeding, and 5 is outstanding. Derek, I quite like this approach.
Yeah, I mean, again, you know, there's a psychology associated with how we treat the agents. You know, we're trying to encourage positive behaviors, we're trying to encourage positive outcomes. And whilst many quality programs start as a deterrent to poor performance, we have to flip that and really encourage and communicate the behaviors, right? And ideally associate those behaviors with the customer scoring high on NPS or customer sat or customer effort. So that combining of the external and the internal scores I'll address in my slides, but it's becoming vital.
Indeed, we've had another tip in from Jonathan, who says, to improve customer satisfaction and call quality, our agents focus on using only positive language and trying to avoid negative language. I think that's certainly a good thing to concentrate on. You do need to be a little bit careful, though, in some of your quality scores as you do that. Right, we're going to, just before we jump across to Derek, going to run a quick poll, and that poll is, are you measuring customer sentiment as part of your quality program? Now, customer sentiment is defined as the tone, context, feelings, a feeling or emotions from customer interaction. So if you'd just like to vote on, are you measuring customer sentiment as part of your quality program? Justin, do you expect it to be very high, the yes camp? I'm
going to expect the yes is low.
Well, let's have a look at the result here. Sample size of 155. The no's have it. The no's have it. 63% no, 29% yes. So, Derek, I know you're going to be talking on this in a minute. Yeah. It does look like most of the audience here might be missing a trick or two. So,
funny, Jonathan. I'm actually encouraged by the 29%. Right? I think that's going the right direction. So it's. There's enlightened managers out there,
Indeed. Well, since I think you're going to be talking on that, I'm not going to spoil your thunder there, and I'll hand it straight across to you, Derek, if you'd like to take.
Okay, great. Listen, thanks, John. Look, yeah, a lot of the dialogue and content is leading in the direction that I wanted to take our information, right? And I'm going to cover the 3 additional items in our 7 ways to improve quality. So collaborating and sharing with your agents, so making them part of your framework, looking at root causes and how that might point the way to meaningful change, because change for the sake of it is not really going to deliver results. And then using customer sentiment to help calibrate. So that idea of using your customers to help you calibrate your scoring and your quality program and modify your quality program to try and bridge the gap between their understanding of the service you delivered and your subjective view of what the service looks like. Okay, so just very quickly, what do we mean by a framework? It's a system of tools and processes and workflows designed to manage and improve the quality of customer interactions. Hopefully it's designed with the customer needs at the forefront rather than the organization's needs. Ideally, you're going to collaborate and share with agents and make them part of your framework. That's really getting buy-in and engagement and trust in the process, moving away from it being a deterrent to making it a force for positive change. Trapping root causes will point the way again to meaningful change. Focus your coaching, focus your process changes, focus the behaviors and maybe the modifications you want to make to your QA framework to sort of move it on to the next level. And then using customer sentiment to calibrate and bridge that gap between our internal scores and what the customer thinks of the service we deliver. Each contact center we find fits into a phase of development, and there are distinct stages of development, and Justin referred to it as the maturity curve, if you like. But basically, you're looking at moving through from operational to tactical to strategic. I think it's important to know what stage your business is at, so that you know what next steps you might look at, what next technologies you might deploy, and also how you engage the rest of the organization with your framework. But ultimately, if you know where you are, it'll definitely help inform smart decision-making and drive growth in your business. So what do I mean by operational QA? It's really the nuts and bolts of the evaluation process and workflows. It's typically based, on short-term decisions and actions involving day-to-day operational issues. It's somewhat of a deterrent to try and screen for poor behaviors. And in many cases, what we see, it's typically employing spreadsheets to collect the data, aggregate it, and try and report on it. Typical goals at an operational stage of maturity would be to maintain consistent delivery, identify poor performers, measure adherence to process and procedures, and that echoes what Justin was talking about in terms of measuring activities as opposed to outcomes, and track agent development. So, typically we see complicated spreadsheets in many cases with pivot tables, to try and report on, which are typically inflexible and very difficult to manage and distribute. And you're talking about replacing that with something that's more streamlined, speeds up the data collection process, allows you to annotate it with commentary at a question level, but also to try and trap the root causes of positive outcomes on the one hand, but also negative outcomes. So looking at tactical QA, what does that mean? We're really looking at the business's medium-term goals and trying to adjust the behaviors and the delivery of service to meet those goals. It's typically tailored by channel rather, by business or by, and also may involve the back office. So one of our clients recently, they introduced a quality program which was downstream from the front of house. And so it was actually a tax department which was offering advice to the agents who were dealing with the customers. And what they started doing was looking at an SLA between that internal department and the front of house and scoring that using ScoreBuddy. So, you know, you can push the concept and the framework in a lot of different directions within the business and try and support the agents who are really at the coalface. Tactical frameworks tend to be changeable. You're looking for, you know, improved client retention, reduce staff churn. So your goals are changing from just delivering service consistently to looking at much more meaningful, I suppose, goals like client retention, like propensity to repurchase, like loyalty, like NPS, like customer effort. You're using it to identify knowledge gaps and inform your coaching teams and see where do they want to focus their energy and effort. And also identifying root causes. And something that came through in one or two of the comments, Jonty, that you shared was, you know, if you're looking for root causes, you can very quickly identify broken processes that perhaps are imposed on the contact center by other parts of the business, or maybe by some of the technology. Maybe it's the way your CRM tool is configured and set up. Maybe it's some of the requirements that have been pushed onto the agents to fill out information that may not be relevant to delivering customer service. Okay, and then taking that to the next level, the idea that it's become strategic, you know, so typically we would find that a mature QA framework has gone through a number of iterations. It's addressed the productivity and the sort of operational issues. It's moved into understanding and addressing tactical requirements for the business. And now we're really talking to the C-suite. We're really expanding the visibility of the QA framework and the QA activities. And we're sharing that with senior management. We're taking their input and they're understanding the impact that we're having on customers through our QA framework. Okay, we have a blog which you can grab off this, but basically we have a little tool there that will assess where you might be and give you some indication of where you might be within that maturity curve. That's for another day. So let me look at the tips that we talked about at the beginning. And how using the right tools can make a really big difference. So what do I mean? You know, when we look at the technology stack and we look at where quality assessment as a technology now, as opposed to a process, fits. Naturally, you have multiple channels coming into your contact center. Still a high proportion of telephone contacts, particularly for more complex interactions. And where we see quality assessment tool is it's sitting across the channels. It's using and interacting with your CRM environment. So the case notes and the case information is probably part of the conversation. And it's also using surveys to collect that external view of the customer service and customer sentiment, and then compare and contrast that with what we're doing internally to understand the service we deliver. So tip 5, collaborating and sharing with your agents will make them part of your framework and will deliver significant improvements. So stop using spreadsheets would be our advice. Use a platform that offers, number 1, flexibility, but also transparency. So by moving away from spreadsheets and by having a common repository for all that information and data and making that available to the agents, the supervisors, team leads, the QA team, the business analysts, and ultimately the management team, then you're going to have a lot more interaction, a lot more understanding of the sort of quality of service that you're delivering. So review and modify your framework based on feedback, internal and external, and look at the priorities and behaviors as your business changes. So again, going back to something Justin referred to, if you inherited a QA framework, you probably need to have a close look at it and see, does it need refreshing? But it's something that should be part of the company philosophy. and behaviors would be at least quarterly, maybe half yearly, sit down and have a cold look at whether the framework is still following the customer's needs and the organizational goals. Communicate with agents and coaches through the platform. The idea that, we send out, 3 Excel evaluations to an agent and then we rush to meet them at the end of a quarter or the end of a month and try and walk through that and understand what's happening. A platform will allow you to make much more real-time collaboration and communication with agents, and they can see the coaching tips in the results and actually start modifying behaviors much more early in the process, which will obviously immediately affect customer outcomes. Allow for challenges and calibration. So calibration, the concept that Justin talked about, where we're trying to make sure that there's an even and consistent application of the framework on the one hand, but also allowing agents to challenge and say, and there may be mitigating factors for a poor score. And say, hey guys, I was, the ship was below water on a Monday morning because we had flu epidemic, and I was running hard to keep customers happy. So, there needs to be a mechanism for allowing that challenge. Tip 6, identifying root causes and using them for meaningful change. The goal here is to understand the underlying causes of not just poor customer service, but also excellent customer service, so that we can replicate that. So we're looking for product and knowledge gaps that might need to be closed and work with the coaching team to address those. We're looking at skill gaps, and that being different to product knowledge gaps. A couple of our customers who are doing putting a lot of effort into root cause analysis are finding, and also comparing that with external surveys, the customers are saying, yeah, the agent was very pleasant, but actually they only had partial information on the product I was trying to purchase, and actually I wasn't sure where to go next. So product knowledge gaps are different to skill gaps. Authority and permissions, again echoing something Justin said, do your agents have the authority to service the customer in the way the customer would like? So can they offer a discount perhaps? Can they offer upsells? Can they share information with the customer about their account that might be meaningful? So think about that. Also, gathering root causes will highlight broken or inefficient processes which may be undermining the agent's ability to actually deliver high quality customer service. There may be other aspects which are probably broader than just the QA framework, but desktop tool failures, a laggy sort of CRM performance. Is it not fit for purpose or poorly deployed? Or environmental negatives, poorly lit rooms, loud rooms. So looking at the ergonomics. So they're slightly outside, those last two are slightly outside of the QA framework process, but in our estimation, and we can see it increasingly with mature deployments of quality frameworks, root causes is becoming a key data point to collect at the point of evaluation. A couple of quick illustrations, and these just grabbed from some customers we work with. But in this case, left inadequate notes. So the handover to the next agent when the customer calls back, there's going to be a problem with that call because the inadequate notes in the file. Incorrect information or not applicable information being provided was the next item. Didn't set the expectation or overcommitted to the customer. Were trapped as root causes in poor performance. The second one here, different organization, different sector, failed to follow process, so that's an adherence type of thing. Again, inadequate notes appearing, so that can easily be coached as a behavior. An interesting one there, could have been completed via self-service. So in the estimation of the evaluator, that call could have actually been diverted if their self-service platform was fit for purpose. So there's a conversation perhaps with the people who own the website and the FAQ to make sure that it's actually delivering the information required by customers or inaccurate information. So they're just a couple of sort of real world examples.
And with some of those screenshots, though, there's quite a lot of detail on there. If anyone did want to see this in more detail, then Derek has agreed that if we drop in the survey box at the end of the webinar, if you'd like to have a demonstration of the system, you can look at that in more detail.
Absolutely, yeah. These are really just illustrative, John T, just to give a sense of what sort of information you might collect. Yeah. Okay, so tip 7, using CSAT scores or NPS scores to help calibrate and bridge that QA gap. So working with a very large multinational organization, they had a situation where exactly what Justin described, where the NPS scores they were collecting through their customer surveys did not reflect the QA scores they seemed to be achieving internally. And naturally, when senior management got visibility of this, they asked the question, well, why is that the case? So their goal was to align internal scoring with the CSAT scores. And interestingly, as they started to look at this, what they actually, as they modified their framework and they modified the weightings and the focus of the QA framework, they found a drop in QA, okay? An initial drop in QA, but it was beginning to more align with the NPS scores. And ideally, obviously, what you want to do is you want to, although your QA scores may drop to meet the NPS scores, you want to pull those NPS scores up over time and see the two aligned. So gathering CSAT scores and comments will inform your scorecard designs, your weightings, your focus. Reviewing comments and categorizing them as positive and negative will also provide invaluable insight. And you're really trying to identify what customers rate as important in their interactions with your organization. And that's what you want to be measuring. So naturally, you're going to revise those weightings and then communicate those changes to your agents so that they understand what you're looking for. There is, Justin again mentioned that agent self-scoring is an interesting approach to this, okay? So this same client took a team and allowed them to self-score. This led to much more self-awareness within the agents as to what behaviors impacted NPS and allowed them to achieve a 4 to 5 point improvement in NPS just within that test team. Now, naturally, that would need to be sold to the leadership in your organization, but it's a very effective way of involving the agents in the whole framework process. And therefore, this new information, this new insight leads to enhanced conversations with your agents and your customer service representatives. So the mechanism for doing that and how you apply technology to make that happen is you carry out post-interaction surveys, collect transactional NPS scores and comments, and try and attribute those then to your agents and up through your supervisors, teams, and groups. And that will help you understand the QA gap with root causes. So the interaction, call, email, or chat, the internal quality score might represent 92%. We're pretty happy with that. They adhered to process, they were compliant. It was a pretty good call by all our estimations. But when we look at the NPS score associated with that same agent's behaviors, the customer felt the product information fell short of their expectations, right? If we have all that data in one place and we can compare and contrast the information, then what are the outcomes? What can we do? What actions do we take? So we've issues identified, training programs may be modified. We might increase the weightings on product knowledge in our framework, look at product training, additional product training for agents who are coming up short in that area, and look at product information support maybe at a desktop level so that the agent can provide the information the customer is looking for. So that's the basic concept and the basic approach. A very quick case study, guys. This is a leading US HR and payroll solution provider, over 500 CSRs, servicing about 200,000 customers. They really have quality at the center of their management conversation and dialogue. They had outgrown their own internal systems, and they were very eager to provide a platform that could provide flexibility and automation. And they use, their framework borrows heavily from CEB's effortless customer experience model. Which is a very interesting model. A lot of articles written on it, a lot of material out there online that you can delve into. But basically, they're looking for data-driven change, right? And they were using the QA analytics to operationalize their strategy for creating a customer-centric quality in the contact center, determining which agents are underperforming, so the right coaching and development interventions can be provided at the right time. And strategically improve their NPS scores and overall customer satisfaction. So it's customer-led program and the idea of effortless customer service. So pretty powerful, and they've been using root cause analysis as part of that exercise. So just very quickly to summarize the items, the tips I touched off: collaborate and share with your agents, make them an essential part of your framework. that dialogue is hugely valuable. Root causes will, if you gather them at the evaluation stage, provide meaningful change within your organization. You really will be able to move the needle on your focal points in your QA framework. And then using customer sentiment to help calibrate and bridge the gap. There are some technology challenges I recognize in joining up those two dots, right? And associating the survey result with the agent who may have delivered the service. But they're not insurmountable, and a single platform will help you do that. And nobody has some of the tools to help you do that. So very quickly, this is us. We're working right across many different sectors, many different environments, many different geographies. We got some big brands working with us in regulated industries, e-retail, etc. We invite you to take a trial or a tour of the product. More than happy, our team here are willing and able to talk through their experience with working with other customers. So with that, I'll hand back to Jonty, and we'll take it from there.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Derek. Very comprehensive. We've got time for just a couple of tips before the top of the hour. Jamie says, we have the agents listen to the call and ask them what their strengths or opportunities were, then address them in comparison with the form filled out by the QA, which helps the coaching recipient feel engaged. I think, Justin, this is one that I think ties in very nicely. If you don't already, make listening to calls a habit. Allows you to understand agent quality, engagement, and customer satisfaction all in one go. And Sarah says, focus on ownership, responsibility, and what you can do to help customers. Well, I'm afraid that's all we've got time for today. In one or two words, if you would like to say what did you like best about the webinar, I'd like to put that into the chat room. Today's winning tip, who will get the either a bottle of champagne, box of chocolates, or an Amazon voucher, is drumroll Charlie, who said, we've taken out all focus on average handling time to the extent we literally have no idea what the numbers are now. The only thing agents care about is customer satisfaction and quality, which I think is fabulous there. So if you'd just like to complete the survey as you lead the webinar, it's only 4 questions long. If you would like a demonstration of the Score Buddy software, please fill in the box in the post-webinar survey would be good. You can watch the replay later on today, probably in about 2 hours time when we've got that loaded up onto the system. And I'd just like to say thank you to our 2 speakers. That is to Justin Robbins. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
And also to Derek Corcoran.
My pleasure.
Thank you very much. And we'll be back next Thursday when we look about good customer service does not happen by accident. Thanks very much. Bye-bye, everyone. Bye-bye.